Hey guys, Orem here, and today I wanted to discuss a pretty remarkable group of men and women for the Allies during World War II. They were known as the Air Transport Auxiliary, or ATA, and they were founded at the outbreak of World War II. They were a civilian organization which made an enormous contribution to the victory by taking over from service pilots the task of ferrying RAF and RN planes from factories, maintenance units, and frontline squadrons. During the war, 1,250 men and women from 25 countries ferried over 309,000 aircraft of 147 different types, without radios, and oftentimes without flying instruction and at the mercy of the British weather. The ATA's headquarters was located at White Waltham Airfield near Maidenhead from February 1940 until the 30th of November 1945. How the ATA began. The idea of using civilian pilots as a kind of territorial air force was put forward in 1938 when the Civil Air Guard was formed to offer subsidized flight training to people who were up to 50 years old. There were also many pilots who had learned to fly in the 1920s and 30s who were either too old or unfit for the Royal Air Force, but wanted to use their flying skills in some way in the impending conflict. Initially, pilots would fly light aircraft to transport mail, dispatches, and medical supplies. But within weeks, the ATA started helping the RAF with ferrying of aircraft from factories and stores to frontline squadrons. From February 1940, the ATA took over the ferrying in its entirety, making a huge contribution to the war effort by releasing fully trained RAF and RN pilots for combat duties. The ATA began expanding rapidly, and credit for turning it into a well-oiled machine goes to its commanding officer, Gerard Deranger, a private pilot who was a director of the pre-war British Airways. He joked that the ATA stood for Ancient and Tattered Airmen. The first recruits were widely experienced. Whether either too old or unfit for active service, some having served in World War I, there was even a retired admiral, Charles Dutton, and Stuart Keith Jop, both who only had one arm. This handicap did not stop them, however, from flying aircraft such as the Spitfire and Typhoon. Women joined to do a man's job. The first 8 women joined the ATA on New Year's Day, 1940. Recruited into this man's world by Pauline Goer, who had made a living giving joyrides with the flying circus. Despite their experience, the women were restricted to flying non-operational types of planes, such as trainers or communications aircraft. They were also paid 20% less than the men, which was typical of the times. With quiet persistence, Pauline eventually won equal flying opportunities for her ladies. On the 19th of July, 1941, Winnie Crossley was the first woman to be checked out on a Hurricane fighter, and from then on, the sky was the limit. In autumn of 1942, First Officer Lettice Curtis became the first woman to fly a 4-engine bomber, an achievement shared by just 11 ATA women. Finally, in 1943, the women were awarded equal pay to their male colleagues, making ATA one of the first equal opportunity employers. During the war, the ATA employed 168 women, including the famous trailblazing pilot Amy Johnson, and a large contingent from the USA, who were recruited by the famous American pilot Jacqueline Cochran. The female pilots became known as the ATA Girls. Flying Spitfires was an amazing thing for women to do, and so they were given a great deal of publicity. Legion of the Air. Men and women came from all over the world to join the ATA. Eventually, 25 nations were represented, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the USA. There were pilots from Chile, China, Russia, and India. The largest contingent from Europe were 17 Poles, including 3 women who reached Britain after escaping via the Balkans and France. Pilots were based at 14 ferry pools, as far apart as Hamble near Southampton and Lossiemouth, I hope I'm saying that correctly, near Inverness in Scotland. 2 of these ferry pools, Hamble and Cosford, had only women pilots and female commanding officers. Margot Gore at Hamble and Marianne Wilberforce at Cosford. Several were near aircraft factories, which were priority targets for the Luftwaffe. The peak monthly output of the Spitfire factory at Castle Bromwich was 320 machines, so it was necessary to move aircraft away to relative safety as soon as they came off the production line. Here's a list of the ferry pools during peak times for the ATA. And hopefully I can find a map of this, but if I can't, I'll just have a list of them here. A day's work. Central Ferry Control, as part of the 41st Group Royal Air Force, was at Andover. Overnight, they would allocate work to the ferry pools, where operations officers were faced with a logistical nightmare. Allocating work to aircrew, depending on their qualification and experience, a day's work could involve several flights in several different types of planes. Aircraft taxis, the Avro Anson, and the Fairchild Argus conveyed pilots to their first ferry job, and if possible, collected them at the end of the day. If not, pilots would stay overnight at airfields, in hotels, or would take the night train back to base. The diary of one American pilot shows that he got fed up with British trains. There could be as much sitting around waiting for the British weather to improve, especially in winter. Depending on their level of experience and training, ATA pilots could be called on to fly any one of 147 different aircraft types from anywhere to anywhere. Yet often, they had never even seen that particular type of aircraft before. Pilot notes were issued for individual aircraft types, but the main guidance was a thin volume of ferry pilot notes, a pocket-sized flip pad of the basic what to do and what not to do for every pilot in service. Logbooks show the variety of types of planes which ATA pilots could fly in a single day were designated into 6 different classes. Class 1, light single-engined. Class 2, advanced single-engined. Class 3, light twin-engined. Class 4, advanced twin-engined. Class 5, 4-engined. Class 6, flying boats. Pilots were allocated a classification according to the types of aircraft they had been cleared to fly. The ATA even had its own flying schools. The ATA was much more than just ferry pilots, who formed about 1/3 of the workforce. There were flight instructors, ground school instructors, ground engineers, crash rescue teams, officers, motor transport drivers, nurses, doctors, administration staff, and more. There were even air cadets and sea cadets employed as messengers and auxiliary crew members. ATA casualties. In total, 173 ATA crew died in ATA service, including Amy Johnson. They are commemorated on a special memorial in St. Paul's Cathedral, London. Poor weather, mechanical failure, or accidents in training were the principal causes. The largest group of ATA graves is at All Saints Cemetery in Maidenhead, where 17 war graves represent men and women of 6 different nationalities. The Forgotten Pilots. There are memorials to the ATA at various airfields, including White Waltham, Ringway, Ratcliffe, Whitchurch, and Hamble. However, official British government recognition did not come until September 2008, when all surviving veterans were awarded a special veterans badge at a ceremony at 10 Downing Street, London. So, let me know your thoughts on this group of amazing, brave men and women, oftentimes who had to fight for a chance to make a difference in the war effort, right? A lot of these men and women knew the magnitude of the conflict at hand and wanted to serve their country as well as the war cause. So I just find it amazing, these stories of people who, like these women who had to fight even to get, equal pay for doing equal work. And even today, women are still fighting, and many other groups are still fighting for equality in the world, especially in third world countries where women oftentimes can't even get a decent education. And so this goes to show how far we've come today, where you have women being able to fly the Hurricane and Spitfire and all these amazing planes and contribute to the war effort. So let me know your thoughts on this and what you'd like to see in the future. So thank you. Over and out.